Whether thou art a ghost that hath come from the earth, or a phantom of night that hath no hollow, or one that lieth dead in the desert, or a ghost unburied, or a demon, or a ghoul, whatever thou be until thou art removed, thou shalt find here no water to drink. Thou shalt not stretch forth thy hand to our own. Into our house enter thou not. Through our fence break through thou not. We are protected, though we may be frightened. Our life you may not steal, though we may be scared to death.
Welcome to Scared to Death, Creeps, Peepers, Roberts, and Annabelles. I'm Dan.
Hello, Dan. Guess my name.
Lynze.
Oh my God, no way.
Nailed it.
So smart.
Already the middle of October. That's crazy. And I think you just have one quick announcement and then we're off and running.
I do just have one quick announcement. You guys don't forget, we're inching closer and closer every day to our the fourth annual live Scared to Death show. You can get your tickets at moment.co/scared to death. We'll be coming to you live from a haunted location in New Orleans on Thursday, October 24th at 6 p.m. We have special limited edition merch at our store, badmagicproductions.com. And Dan will be telling a nightmare fuel.
Yeah, I've been working on that in the background. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that'll be the only place you can hear that particular nightmare fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we're really excited. So yeah, just make sure you get your tickets and hang out with us.
Sweet.
So weird.
How many stories do you have this week?
I have two very cool tales.
I know you're spending extra time really looking through a bunch, so you found some that you really like?
Yeah. My first one I feel like is very different. A black magic tale from South Africa.
Okay.
So just really, I think outside of the realm of what we're used to.
Yeah.
But it really was strange. And then my second tale, I so rarely say this, but my second tale is quite graphic. So parents, if you have littles listening, I'm going to say check this one first before you let them listen to it. Because even I was like, ooh, okay.
All right. Thanks for the heads up.
It's a modern, what I interpret to be a modern day possession.
Okay.
Really creepy.
I have two as well. The first will take us to Colorado, where we will visit the legendary Stanley Hotel. Big name in American horror lore, and if you don't already know, you will find out why when I share the story.
Have we not been there before on this show?
No, and I looked all over the place, and I was checking our little document I keep, and I was like, man, I thought for sure we did that. No.
I think it's because maybe at some point we tried to host a show there, and then it didn't pan out.
That happened, yep.
Yeah, that was a bummer.
Next, we'll head to Places Unknown to hear, or a place. Unknown is one place.
That's a TV show. Parts unknown.
To hear the strange, unsettling story of a mother experiencing something unexplainable with her daughter that has left her shaken, and it would leave me shaken as well, and I don't want to give away any more than that.
Okay.
So now once you've, put your pre-story spoopy socks on, get the protection ritual finished, I'll jump into the story.
I've got these weird spoopy face socks, and I don't know who it's supposed to be. Maybe it's Dracula?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. It's not Frankenstein. Mm-mm. I don't know, but it's creepy, and I like it.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready, Pischetti.
Let's do it. We're just going to jump right into this first story. Time now for the tale of the Stanley Hotel. The Stanley Hotel, surprisingly, considering its place in horror lore, doesn't look haunted. With its sparkling white grandiose colonial manor house and its pristine rose gardens, with its Tuscan columns and Venetian windows, with its ornate staircases and elaborate stone balusters, and of course its panoramic view of the breathtaking Rocky Mountains, the Stanley Hotel actually looks quite like heaven on earth, at least if you've never read Stephen King's 1977 instant classic, The Shining. If you have, then that novel, one that literally gave me nightmares when I was a kid when I first read it, is going to color your view, and the Stanley Hotel might look a lot less like paradise and more like a house of horrors. The malevolently haunted Outlook Hotel in The Shining is actually based on the Stanley, and the hellish nightmare the book's main characters endure while staying at the Outlook, actually based on a real experience Stephen King had while staying at the Stanley. In 1974, Maine's most famous son was living with his wife, Tabitha, and their 3 children in Boulder, Colorado. They would only stay in Colorado for about a year before returning to their beloved Maine, but the state left a lasting impression on Stephen. When they first moved out west, King was working on his post-apocalyptic fantasy novel, The Stand, and by his own account, struggling with alcoholism. And one weekend, King and his wife decided to take a last-minute couple's trip to the mountains, and they ended up in Estes Park, about a 90-minute drive from Denver. After wandering around the town for a bit, they found themselves at the front desk of the Stanley Hotel, asking if there were any rooms available. The concierge informed them that, in fact, every single room was available. It was the last day of the season, and all of the other guests were checking out. The concierge said that if they wanted to stay the night, they had to pay cash since the front desk had already finalized its credit record for the season, and King and his wife obliged. Shortly thereafter, they were ushered into room 217 of the Stanley. In one interview, King later said, "We were the only people in that hotel, and the wind was whistling outside and the rooms were all empty." What a perfect setup for some horror. The night he spent in that cavernous, vacant manor, Stephen King had a nightmare that would change his life forever. In his dream, King watched helplessly as a coiled fire hose jolted to life and chased his youngest son through the Stanley Hotel's labyrinth of hallways, threatening to wrap itself around the little boy's small ribcage and suffocate the life out of him. King woke up in a start, covered in sweat and breathing hard. Knowing he wouldn't be able to go back to sleep, he opened the hotel room window and lit a cigarette. As he took in the smoke and the pale, gloomy view of the barren town and forbidding mountains, he conceived the story of The Shining, which he knew in that moment would be about the Stanley, or at least a fictional version of it. When he published the book 3 years later, it was a smash success, and it established the already very successful King as a true master of horror, one of the best to ever do it. Although the overlooks hotel's sentient garden animals and spectral partygoers and ghosts of murderous hotel caretakers past are undeniably terrifying, they are still just figments of King's imagination, fictional entities that exist only in the mind of the author and those who read his work. The same cannot be said for the allegedly very real spirits that haunt the definitely very real Stanley Hotel. During the summer season, the Stanley is inundated with a million different sounds. Children playing and parents chasing after them. Guests checking in and bellboys lugging clunky bags upstairs. Maids bustling from room to room, sweeping, cleaning, and chatting with one another. Servers stacking dishes in the restaurant and cooks shouting over the sound of a stereo. And then there's the wildlife. Birds, foxes, coyotes, bears, mountain lions, deer, elk, and chipmunks with their chirping and howling and hissing and growling. And of course, there's the mountains themselves. Those great rock behemoths and all their trees that creak and groan, that rustle in the wind, that echo with the sound of footsteps. But amongst all that pandemonium, at the Stanley Hotel, you're likely to hear something else too. And that is the sound of someone playing the piano. Admittedly, in and of itself, that is not a very unsettling or unusual thing to experience. If you heard that sound while getting ready for bed in your hotel room, or drinking a cocktail in the lounge, or running down the hallway to grab some ice from the vending machine, you'd probably write it off as some musician performing somewhere else in the hotel. And in a way, you'd be right. The original owner of the Stanley was a man named Freeman Oscar Stanley, who opened the luxurious resort in 1909 alongside his wife Flora. 1 year later, in 1910, Freeman added a concert hall to the hotel grounds and gifted it to Flora, who was a talented pianist. Unfortunately, Flora was only used to playing the piano for close friends and family at intimate gatherings. And during her first performance in the packed concert hall, she broke down in tears and ran off of the stage in a panic. The stage, a public performance, is truly more frightening than even ghosts to many people. Though in life she would never perform again outside of playing for a few friends, in death, it seems, Flora continues to play the piano for the hotel guests. The faint sound of her mournful songs can be heard throughout the hotel, but it is in the concert hall itself where the phenomena is most often witnessed. Apparently, she just had to die to get over her stage fright. Staff and visitors alike have reported seeing the piano bench get slowly pulled back away from the piano itself by an unseen force, and moments later, after some invisible entity seats themselves, hearing the intense sound of the instrument resonate throughout the empty room. Some have even claimed to have seen the shadowy figure of Flora actually sitting on the piano bench, staring down at the black and white keys, her hands hovering frozen above them, her nervous heartbeat so loud, witnesses feel like they can hear it thumping inside their own skulls. Another ghost that resides in the concert hall is that of a former employee named Paul, who died in 2005. One of his duties in life was to ensure that the auditorium was cleared out by 11 p.m. for the cleaning crew. He was known to spend his breaks hanging out in the basement under the concert hall, lounging on the right side of a brown leather couch that he had purchased himself. After Paul died, none of his family or friends were willing to make the trek up to Estes Park to retrieve his beloved couch. So in the basement of the concert hall, it remains. And according to multiple current and former employees, if you hang out in that basement at night for long enough, it's likely that out of the corner of your eye, you'll see Paul's ghost, sitting on the right side of the couch, staring straight right back at you. But like so many other spirits, if you turn to look directly at him, he disappears. Paul's spirit has also been known to make physical contact with the living if they are loitering around the concert hall past opening hours. Many visitors have claimed that as soon as the clock strikes 11 p.m., they have felt the distinct feeling of someone's hand wrapping around their upper arm, or someone tapping them on the shoulder as if to get their attention. But when they turn around to see who it is, there's no one there. It's also common to hear a disembodied voice whisper directly into your ear at around 11 o'clock, "You need to leave." A couple years ago, an anonymous construction worker found himself working alone in the concert hall late into the evening after everyone else had already gone home. He was redoing the floors of the great auditorium and planned on staying there until after his job was complete. However, according to him, at around 11 p.m., he heard a hushed voice tell him, "Get out." At first, the construction worker thought it was some kind of security guard he hadn't seen come in, or maybe some kids playing a trick on him. But the longer he ignored the command, the louder the voice got, until it sounded like a screaming in his face, "Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!" The construction worker finally heeded the spirit's command, frantically gathering up his tools and sprinting out of the concert hall and into the dark night. In addition to the concert hall, one of the most haunted areas of the Stanley Hotel is the extravagant staircase in the lobby of the main manor, which, paranormal activity aside, truly is a sight to behold. The Stanley's famous staircase, which was built in 1909, is a perfectly preserved remnant of early 20th century architecture, and every year it draws hundreds of visitors from all over the world just to look at it. It's adorned with a Baroque wooden banister, a gold and red Art Deco carpet, a crystal chandelier suspended above the first floor landing, and countless portraits and mirrors with elaborate gold frames mounted along the walls. In addition to tourists, it seems that the spirits of the dead are also inexplicably drawn to the staircase of the Stanley Hotel. In fact, the grand staircase is so rife with spiritual activity that it has earned itself the nickname of the Vortex. For almost half a century, paranormal investigators have theorized that the area is a portal that entities from the other side can use to cross over. Others believe that the vortex does not function exactly like a portal per se, but more like a small tear in the fabric that separates the realm of the living from the realm of the dead, a place where the veil between worlds is the thinnest, giving us a less obscured view of the spirits we don't normally see at all. Based on over a century of reports while ascending the grand steps of the vortex, it's likely you'll experience bone-chilling cold spots or become abruptly overwhelmed with nausea and fatigue. As soon as you step into the hallway or the lobby, however, the feeling instantly fades. Or if you happen to glance at one of the many mirrors on the walls, you might catch a glimpse of an unnaturally, impossibly tall man standing directly behind you, staring down at the top of your head. The entity is most often described as wearing a long black winter coat and a derby hat, standing with his tentacle-like arms dangling by his side with his palms facing outwards. Such a very strange and specific presentation. Or for the briefest of moments, you might see the reflection of a forlorn, middle-aged woman wearing a yellow floral sundress, looking lost and confused. The most common claim about this entity is that visitors taking ghost tours of the hotel will see her standing amongst their group in one of the mirrors, but when they scan the people around them, she's not actually there. As you climb the resplendent staircase, you might see, as many others have claimed, glowing orbs and impossible light distortions, flickering and dancing along the walls. Or you might see two figures standing at the very top of the stairs, holding hands and looking upon all the commotion beneath them. These two indistinct spirits are thought to be Freeman and Flora Stanley, bound eternally to the hotel they built, watching it endure into the future without them. Another area of the Stanley Hotel that seems to be a breeding ground for the supernatural is the fourth floor of the main manor. If you end up staying in one of the fourth floor rooms, you're unlikely to get any sleep due to the echoing sound of small children giggling and playing in corridors. Though most guests disregard the sound, assuming it is just some rowdy kids causing a ruckus, others are certain the noise is not of this world. This is because the high-pitched laughter sometimes comes not from the hallway on the other side of the door, but from inside the hotel room itself. In one case, an anonymous man and his wife were visiting the hotel from Wyoming to celebrate their 5th wedding anniversary. Their room happened to be on the 4th floor. And the man claimed that on the very first night of their stay, both he and his wife distinctly heard children running up and down the hallway and practically shrieking with laughter. It didn't bother them at first, but by the time it was 1 a.m. and the kids still hadn't settled down, the man's wife phoned the front desk to ask if the kids' parents could come get them, or if someone from the hotel could ensure that they wouldn't just continue to keep up with all the noise they were making. The concierge said she would do what she could. Soon thereafter, it sounded like the kids were done running. The next night of their stay, the 4th floor was peaceful and silent, and the man and his wife fell asleep as soon as they crawled into bed. However, at around midnight, the man woke up to his wife grabbing him tightly by the arm and pointing at the closet in the corner of their room. He began groggily asking her what was wrong, but she quickly shushed him and whispered, her eyes still on the wooden closet door, "Do you hear that?" The man rubbed his eyes, tried to listen for whatever it was his wife was so freaked out about. Took a while to hear it, but when he finally did, terror began to swell within him. There was someone in the closet, a child maybe, and they were breathlessly giggling in that way that kids do when they're not supposed to laugh. The man grabbed his phone, tiptoed across the room, and as he did, he heard someone in his closet say, "Shh, he's coming." When the man yanked open the creaky wooden door, he found the closet to be empty. He turned around to look at his wife. He was completely dumbfounded, and so was she. Just as he was about to ask her, "What was that?" the closet door slammed shut behind him. The reason the 4th floor of the Stanley Hotel might be plagued by what appears to be young and mischievous spirits is that back in the early 19th century, the 4th floor actually served as a lodging area for full-time female staff members, their children, and their nannies. So although there's no documentation of any children dying on the premises, perhaps their spirits have returned to their former childhood home after death. Above all else, the most famous ghost of the Stanley Hotel is that of Elizabeth Wilson, the former head chambermaid, said to inhabit room 217, which, if you recall, is the very same room that Stephen and Tabitha King stayed in. Although she didn't die in room 217, as many sources have falsely claimed, Miss Wilson did suffer a grievous and traumatic injury there. On June 26, 1911, just 2 years after the resort first opened, the west wing of the Stanley Hotel literally exploded. According to an article published in the Fort Collins Express, the explosion was caused by an accumulation of acetylene gas from a leaky pipe. The gas accumulated in the space between the ceiling of the dining room and the floor of the 2nd story. A chambermaid, Miss Wilson, who was in a room directly above the dining room, was in the act of lighting the gas when the match which she held in her hand ignited the escaping gas. The explosion which followed tore a huge hole in the floor, precipitating great quantities of plaster, timbers, and other debris into the dining room. The chambermaid had both ankles broken from the concussion of the explosion and was thrown into the hole in the floor. Shockingly, Miss Wilson somehow survived that accident, and upon recovering, immediately returned to work as the head chambermaid of the Stanley. In death, it seems, she is attempting to do the same. For decades now, guests who have stayed in room 217 have experienced unsettling and freakish wonders within its walls, in addition to all the typical stuff associated with a ghostly presence, like random cold spots, doors opening and closing on their own, lights flickering on and off, and faint whispers heard in the dark. Guests have also experienced something much more unique in room 217. Lodgers will go to bed late at night with their room disheveled and slightly a mess, and the next morning they'll wake up and everything will be clean. Their trash will be empty, new towels will be hanging on the bathroom door, and their clothes will be neatly folded and arranged meticulously in the closet. Now, you might be inclined to believe that that was probably just the work of housekeeping. However, multiple witnesses have claimed that when they've called the front desk in the morning to see if housekeeping had been in their room within the last couple of hours, the answer was always no. Also, what sort of creepy housekeeper would sneak into someone's room at the break of dawn to clean while they slept? Moreover, wouldn't you wake up if you heard someone shuffling around in your room? And the stories about Miss Wilson in room 217 don't end there. According to multiple decades worth of reports, the dead chambermaid has a very strict set of values and becomes incensed when guests commit sin in room 217. Specifically, Miss Wilson is deeply offended by unmarried couples that attempt to sleep together in that room, and she will make herself known in order to try and stop them. Oftentimes, male guests will wake up in the morning to find their bags packed and placed by the door. One witness even claimed that he found his duffel bag sitting in the middle of the hallway outside of room 217 with everything, including his toothbrush, inside of it. When he and his girlfriend went to bed the night before, the bag had been unzipped and overflowing with clothes on the floor next to his side of the bed. His girlfriend, he claims, swore on her life she didn't do it and was actually so terrified by the weirdness of it all, they cut their trip short. A few other male guests have claimed to have actually seen their bags moving slowly across the floor in the middle of the night as if being pulled by an unseen force. Another common experience endured by unmarried couples staying in room 217 is the disquieting feeling of freezing cold air swelling between them while they lay in bed, forcing them apart. One source described the sensation as icy pins and needles, like the feeling you get in your cheeks while skiing, like winter wind swatting violently against your skin. Except there is no wind, there's not even an open window, and the air conditioning is off. Due to the overwhelming number of paranormal claims about Room 217, it has become a landmark that horror fans and ghost hunters and thrill seekers from all around the world make a pilgrimage to see. One such curious soul who once requested to stay in Room 217 was none other than renowned actor and comedian Jim Carrey. In 1994, Carrey was filming the movie Dumb and Dumber at the Stanley Hotel and asked if, while they were there, he could spend the night in the legendary haunted room. The hotel obliged. After filming wrapped up later that evening, the actor disappeared into room 217. However, some 3 hours later, Carrey reportedly reemerged in the lobby with his bags packed and a pale look on his face, asking if he could switch rooms. According to The Atlantic, when asked about what the actor had seen in room 217 that scared him so much, one hotel employee said, "It's a shady one. What happened to him in that room, we don't know. He never spoke of it."
That's so random. Did you know that about Jim Carrey before
No,
this?
did not.
Yeah.
And before you have anything, I have to get this out of my head. I said early 19th century when the kids used to stay like with the staff up in the hallway. Early 20th century because the hotel was built in the early 1900s.
You feel better now?
I had to pin that in my head. I didn't want to stop because the story was moving along good, but I was like, I gotta correct that before we
get a bunch of emails about like This isn't time suck.
No,
you know?
but I like to be accurate.
No, I know. It's just funny. Yeah, I totally get it. Okay, well, I'm going to say the obvious, which is only obvious to you and me, that my best friend's name is Elizabeth Wilson.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I didn't even connect that because I always just think of her as Liz.
Oh, yeah.
And when you change it to Elizabeth,
yeah,
I just think if it would have been Liz Wilson, I'm like, oh my God. But yeah, I forget that her full name, of course, is Elizabeth.
Lizzie. I'm going to have a conversation with Thin Lizzie about this. Is she who she says she is? Or she doesn't like spoopy stuff, so I don't think she'll be thrilled to hear this.
Funny.
I don't know why, but I had this thought as you were telling this. I was like, God, I wish we just had just one rule that we could count on when it came to the paranormal. And the rule that I decided that I wanted, if we could have just one rule, just one rule would be that if in life something is dedicated to us, then we know in death that's where we're going to come and spend our new life. So like
interesting.
What's her name? Stanley, the wife, Flora. Yeah, Flora. Like, because it's interesting. Like that place was obviously very important to her. Her husband built it for her, blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, it would make sense that she would want to go back there and be in this space with him. And I thought, well, how lovely. You know, that would be so nice.
That would be cool if you could know that you were going to do that.
Yeah. And then like maybe people would like work hard in life to have small dedications to the people they love. Like maybe it's just like a nice bench in a park or something, because then you would know. I guess it's kind of similar to having like a headstone or, you know, like where you're buried. But I was just thinking about if there was something that they really enjoyed in life and then it was dedicated to them. Maybe your grandfather goes to the same burger restaurant every Friday after work and he's got like his favorite bar stool, like just things like that. It's like, because I think that when we lose people, we try to honor them by remembering what they loved or going back to places that they loved. It's like, what if that was the one rule about death that we knew for sure?
You could find them.
You knew you could just like just a tiny piece of them there.
Yeah.
I know it's unrealistic, but I like the sentimentality. I can't say that word.
Yeah, you said it right. Yeah, I wonder with like structures in those situations, like if the structure goes away, do they then not get to come back? Like if but then you could like the loophole could be pick like some landmark, like in a park or something where they're not going to build on it. We're gonna meet at this rock. Yeah, we're gonna meet at on the shores of this lake.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And then of course, like my brain goes to like, and then there would be some jerk who would like, dedicate something to their partner that they actually really hated, and then you'd be stuck there in death, and then
Trap
you'd be,
somebody.
I know. I was like, this would go sideways really fast.
Do you want to see some pictures?
Yeah, sure, of course.
This first one is just the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah.
The main manor's exterior shot there from Wikipedia.
No, it's beautiful.
Yeah, really. I mean, those mountains
ever been
behind
there?
it. No, I've
me
not. No, never been to Estes Park. This next one, just a little corridor in the hotel.
Cool.
It makes me think of The Shining instantly. The movie.
I know. I actually kind of can't look at it without feeling a little uncomfortable.
This next one, the main staircase.
Yeah, I mean,
Just that ornate woodwork. Beautiful.
I know. When I see staircases like that, I do think like, how cool would it have been to be very wealthy in the era of, these giant elaborate balls and just walking. Like, I just imagine you standing at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for me to present myself, just the formality of it. And obviously, like, being a rich white person at that time was so fucking spectacular. And I understand all the other connotations that come with it. But just as someone who loves to like have pomp and circumstance and all that, I'm like, I just want to go back there for like one day, just one party,
just a ball party.
just one.
This is room 217, so it's a little shot, just normal from the outside.
Kind of. It already feels kind of creepy.
Yeah, because the hallway.
And like the light is not great. I mean, could just be the photo.
And then that's from The Shining, so you can see like they based it obviously on the hotel and did a really good job. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there is this thing about hotel hallways; they all look the same.
Yeah.
So if there's a. Oh, what's that?
Okay, sorry.
That's
so
okay. Go ahead. No, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay, so this next one, this is the last one here. This is a supposed ghost caught on camera on the stairs here, and it is pretty creepy. When I'm trying to zoom in.
Okay, let's see what you got. Nope, you didn't do it.
There we go.
There we go. Oh,
I mean, that is weird that wasn't an actual person standing there.
And where did this photo come from?
People magazine.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, not the most reputable source.
But it's not like Star magazine. It's not like a tabloid like to that level.
True.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a regular like newspaper or whatever, but it's also not like the Weekly World News. It's not like Bat Boys being talked about in there. It's just like, a gossipy tabloid.
It is a strange photo.
Yeah, very strange.
Because it feels very three-dimensional. It feels that's not even the word I want. It feels like it.
What feels three-dimensional? The photo?
The ghost.
Oh, yes, the ghost. Yes, I thought you said the photo. I was trying to follow. Yes, yeah, exactly. The ghost feels like a fully formed person there.
Yeah, there's like an arm and it just doesn't feel wispy. You know how they often do. It feels like you could reach out and touch that.
Yeah, it's a weird photo.
Okay.
And again, the photos will be on our socials. For our patrons, we also embed them into the episode description. The photos there.
This is true
on Patreon, but otherwise you can go to Scared to Death Podcast at Scared to Death Podcast on either Instagram or Facebook.
Nailed it. Good job.
Thank you.
You're very good at this. You're good with words.
I try.
Yeah.
I stumble, but I try.
Well,
I stumble, but I get back up.
Yeah. Chumbawamba.
Unless you have anything else.
I do not.
Okay, let's leave Colorado for our next story.
Okay.
No setup for the second tale either. We're just going to get right into a pretty horrifying encounter, a very strange one.
Okay.
That one anonymous mother wrote of having with some, it's hard to explain, some sort of entity. You will see here shortly.
Okay, let's go, Dan.
Time now for the tale of Mommy, Are You Awake? One of my most vivid memories from childhood is waking my mom up in the middle of the night when I was sick. I remember shuffling into her small bedroom, clutching my stomach and trying not to trip over the dirty laundry on the floor. I remember looking at her face in the blue glow of the TV, thinking about how pretty she looked in her sleep, all calm and peaceful. And I remember whispering as softly as I could, "Mama, I don't feel so good." I remember the way her face abruptly contorted as she woke up, how her eyes snapped open wide and frantic, like floodlights on a foggy night, how she sucked in air like she had just been choking, how her body jolted straight up like a corpse resurrected from the grave. I remember being frightened by her sudden, jerky movements and the way she looked at me like she didn't know who I was. But I also remember the way her face softened with recognition and concern, and how she scooped me up in her arms and asked me what was wrong and what she could do to help. Looking back on that memory, I've only ever thought about how scary it was for me to see my mom so disoriented and confused by my presence. It wasn't until I became a parent myself that I realized how scary it actually is to be woken up by a tiny toddler whispering to you in the dark. My daughter is now 4. Her name is Miranda. She's the light of my life and the sweetest thing to ever walk the planet. I love her and my husband Tim to death. But I will say, by no fault of her own, at least once a week, that little girl scares the bejesus out of me. Partly because I scare easily, and partly because she's like a freaking ninja creeping around our condo. Don't get me wrong, she doesn't mean to be sneaky. She's 4, for goodness sake. She's not coordinated enough to intentionally sneak around without being seen or heard. She just does. It's because she's so freaking tiny that her little footsteps don't make a sound. And on top of that, she's just a really quiet and soft-spoken little girl. She's a listener, an observer. She never barges in anywhere. She just silently glides into the room and waits for us to notice her standing in the corner. She's a bit of a specter creeping around in the shadows, a cute, bashful, snuggly, itty-bitty specter, but still you can see how her inadvertent stealthiness could lead to more than a few jump scares. I'll be doing something like reading in bed or watching a movie in the living room when I'm suddenly overwhelmed with the feeling that I'm being watched. I'll survey the room and find that it's completely empty, so I'll go back to whatever it is I'm doing in the first place. Then out of nowhere, she'll be standing right in front of me. And because I'm a scaredy cat, I always jump a little or gasp or let a little yelp out. I feel awful every time she scares me. I mean, I know it can't be doing her a whole lot of psychological good, but I really can't help it. I just scare easy, always have. The worst is when she wakes me and her dad up in the middle of the night because she feels sick or had a nightmare or something like that. Because she never actually says anything to wake us up. She just stands super close to my side of the bed so her face is level with mine and looks at me silently with these big old bug eyes, waiting for me to, I don't know, sense her standing there in my sleep and wake up, which I guess I always do eventually. Some leftover primal instinct from the caveman times or whatever feels her presence and urges me awake. But no matter how many times it happens, it always scares me. There's just something about waking up in the dark, to the indistinct face of a tiny spectral figure hovering inches away from my own that sends me into a momentary flur of terror. But then I get over it, I come to my senses, so to speak, just like my mom did when I was little. And I scoop my little girl up in my arms and ask her what's wrong and what I can do to help. At least, most of the time I do. But a few months ago, something happened that I can't wrap my head around. Neither can Tim. And we're both too afraid to ask Miranda. It was around 2 a.m. and I had only just fallen asleep an hour or so earlier. It had taken me a while to doze off that evening because Tim forgot to put on his night guard and was grinding his teeth like crazy. That sounded like nails on a chalkboard to me. Normally, I would have shoved him awake and told him to get his freaking night guard, but he had to get to work early the next morning, and I wanted him to get his rest. So I endured the piercing noise. Anyway, I'd only been asleep for an hour-ish when it happened. I was dreaming about my mom. In the dream, I was 6 years old, sick and going to wake her up. It all felt so real. The sour, heavy nausea oppressing my stomach and bubbling up in my throat, the shadowy darkness of her bedroom, and the distinct glow of her old TV, the urgency to get to her in time. I think it was a lucid dream. I had such control over my movements and where I looked at and what I was doing. I was autonomous in every way. But normally on the few other occasions that I've had a lucid dream, I always know that I'm dreaming. But this wasn't like that. I had no idea I was unconscious. There was no part of me that questioned the reality of what I was experiencing or who I was. I was just 6 years old and sick and needed my mom. It was as if I had never been who I am now, never been older than 6, and this was just my life. The indistinct, formless simulation of hallways and doors and walls and rooms that I wandered around was my home. It was real. There was nothing odd about it. Finally, I made it to my mom's bedroom. In the darkness, I attempted to navigate the cluttered floor, but it wasn't laundry and pillows and empty shoeboxes like it should have been. It was pictures of Miranda, thousands of them, piled in tentative stacks and scattered across the carpet. I don't remember actually looking at any of the photos and seeing Miranda's face. I just knew. It didn't bother me, though. The temporal impossibility of me being a 6-year-old and also having a 4-year-old daughter, it was just dream logic, I guess. I didn't think anything of it, except that I didn't want to accidentally tear or crumple any of the photographs, so I tiptoed gingerly around them. After what felt like a lifetime, I made it to my mom's side. She looked beautiful. I put my face close to hers and whispered, as softly as I could, "Mama, I don't feel so good." She didn't move. Mama, I don't feel so good," I whispered again. "Mama, please wake up." I waited for her to jump awake, startled and confused, with wild, panicked eyes like she always does. But she didn't. Instead, I watched in horror as her chest began to slowly lift up off the mattress, like she was a marionette, and her puppeteer was delicately pulling on the strings attached to her sternum, and he just kept pulling and pulling and pulling until she was sitting upright in bed. "Mama? Are you awake?" I whimpered. She didn't reply. Her eyes were still closed, her head was slumped downwards, and she was slouching so grotesquely that it looked like she had a hunch in her back. She must be sleeping, I thought. She's just sleeping strangely. The longer I looked at her, the stranger she became. Her spine seemed to undulate faintly under her thin, pale skin. Her tight braid seemed to be slowly pulling on her scalp, so her forehead was taut and stretched and about to split, and I could see every vein pulse underneath. And her breathing. I know the rhythm of my mom's breath while she sleeps, like I know the words to my favorite song. This wasn't it. Each inhale was jagged and raspy, like her lungs had been stitched together. Suddenly, her head violently twisted towards me, so her face was inches away from my own. Her eyes were still closed. Her mouth was slightly agape. She was no longer beautiful. She looked distorted, sick, warped in delicate ways I couldn't pinpoint. Then she screamed. The guttural shriek that erupted from within her wretched lungs, was inhuman. I felt my own lungs burst from the sound like glass shattering within me. I was terrified. I cried, "Mama, please stop!" She did. Her jaw clamped shut, abruptly cutting off the noise. For a moment, she was suspended there, looking at me with her eyes closed, breathing like the room was filled with smoke. Then she slumped back down into bed, like her marionette strings had been released. I stared at the unnatural body before me, waiting for her to wake up. In the distant background of my dreamscape, I heard footsteps. Someone was walking down the hallway. I didn't care, I just needed my mom to wake up. "Mommy, please wake up. Mommy, I don't feel very good. I need your help," I pleaded. She didn't budge. The footsteps were getting louder. They were getting closer. Mommy, please wake up. Mommy, please." I now woke up in my own bed, drenched in sweat. My heart was racing like I had just ran a marathon. I looked anxiously over at Tim. He was still sound asleep, grinding his teeth and snoring gently. I sighed. I looked up at the black ceiling, trying to recall the last little details of what I had just been dreaming. "Mommy, are you awake?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. Miranda was standing right next to my side of the bed. I could barely make out her features in the shadows. Her tiny frame was illuminated only by the faint red numbers blinking on my ancient alarm clock, which read 2:03 a.m. For a moment, her face looked distorted. It's like I was looking at her reflection in a dark hall of mirrors, or like she was a drawing that someone tried to erase. Her nose and mouth looked blurry and gnarled. Her cheeks looked like they were drooping, and her eyes looked uneven. One was bulging and the other was too small. But the moment passed. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I could see her clearly. She was wearing her unicorn PJs and peering up at me with her familiar wide and pensive eyes. "Oh, hi, honey," I whispered as I scooped her up and sat her on my lap. She rested her head against my chest, but kept her arms stiffly folded in her lap, which was odd. She's really cuddly, and normally when I set her in my lap, she snuggles right up next to me. But that night she was rigid, stoic almost. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked quietly. "I don't feel so good, Mommy," she said. Sorry, sweetheart," muttered Tim from the other side of the bed. His grumbly voice startled me. I hadn't realized he was awake. "I think I need to throw up," Miranda stated. Tim carried her to our bathroom while I followed close behind. I'll never forget noticing the way she stared at me from over his shoulder. Her face was expressionless. Her mouth was in a tight, straight line. Her eyes were cold. She didn't blink, not even when I turned on the searingly bright overhead lights, which I always say make the bathroom look like an operating room in a hospital. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. I just figured she must be really sick. Also, what was I supposed to think? My little girl was sick and in pain. That was all I was worried about at that time. Tim set Miranda down gently in front of the toilet. She sat with her knees folded in that way that only little kids can, and placed her hands deliberately on either side of the porcelain bowl. Tim went to go stand in the doorway so he could watch from a safe distance. He hates vomit more than anything, and tries to avoid seeing and or smelling it as much as he can. I took up my spot behind Miranda, rubbing her back and softly tucking her hair behind her ears. "It's okay, honey. If you need to throw up, just go ahead. It's gonna be okay," I said in my most comforting voice. Immediately, Miranda started dry heaving. With every empty retch, her tiny body surged forward. The convulsions were so violent that I suddenly became afraid she might break her little ribs on the rim of the toilet. I glanced at where Tim was standing, but the door frame was empty. I felt so helpless. I had never seen her this sick before. I didn't know what else to do, so I just kept rubbing her back and murmuring, shh, that's it. It's gonna be okay. The dry heaving went on for 5, maybe 10 minutes, though in the moment it felt like hours. With every passing second, the dull terror in my stomach grew sharper and more potent. I was just about to ask Tim if we should call the doctor when Miranda suddenly froze, mid-dry heave. It was so unnatural. I don't know how else to explain it. I stared at the motionless form of my daughter. The room was silent except for the buzz of the bathroom light. I cautiously reached forward and placed my hand in the center of my little girl's back. Honey, are you okay? I asked softly. Miranda slowly turned her head to look at me over her tiny shoulder. Mommy, she whispered, are you scared of me? There was an edge in her sweet voice I had never heard before. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. It was a knife in my heart. I tried to reply in an appropriate and motherly way, but I was so shocked and confused it was nearly incomprehensible. No, of course I'm not. You're scared, Mommy. She flatly interrupted in her tiny voice. You are. I was about to tell her that that's the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard, and that she is the light of my life and the most precious thing on earth to me, and I could never be afraid of her, when suddenly I noticed something. Miranda was still hunched over the toilet, looking over her shoulder at me. Her expressionless face hadn't changed at all, but now there was a little drop of blood trickling out of the corner of her mouth. Forgetting everything else, I grabbed Miranda by the arms and swung her around so she was sitting cross-legged in front of me. Oh my God! I uttered. A deluge of blood was spilling over her bottom lip and streaming down her chin and neck, pooling in the collar of her pajamas. She was smiling. Her baby teeth were stained red. I screamed, Tim! Call 911! Tim! Silence. I couldn't wait for Tim. I needed to get help. I put my hands on Miranda's shoulders and assured her, I'll be right back, okay? I'll be right back. She didn't say a word. She just kept smiling. I stumbled to my feet and ran into the bedroom, where I collided head-on with Tim. He frantically asked me what was happening. I couldn't explain it. I just told him to go look at Miranda. As I ransacked my nightstand for my phone, I heard Tim exclaim from the bathroom, Jesus Christ! It's okay, honey, it's okay. A second later, he was back by my side, breathing heavily. Well, we need to get her to a hospital, he said in a shaky voice. I know, but I can't find my phone to call 911, I cried. We'll drive. I'll go get my keys. You get Miranda. I nodded and ran back into the bathroom. But the bathroom was empty. Miranda was gone. Unbridled terror ripped through me. Tim! I shrieked at the top of my lungs. Tim! He reappeared in the doorframe of the bathroom, gripping his keys in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked exhausted and panicked. What is it? As he scanned the room, his voice trailed off. Where's Miranda? He asked. I'm right here, Daddy, said a petite voice from the shadows. Tim moved to the side. Miranda was standing in the bedroom right behind him. She was wearing her unicorn pajamas and hugging her favorite teddy bear. There was no blood around her mouth or on her chin or neck or shirt. She was stainless and clean, albeit for her messy bedhead. Tim picked her up and set her on the bathroom sink. He set his phone down next to her. I remember that because it flashed the time, 2:26 a.m. We stood in front of Miranda, checking her eyes and cheeks and throat and hands and ears, searching for evidence of the bloody sickness we both witnessed that had plagued her just a few moments ago. There was nothing. In between yawns, Miranda told us that she wasn't sick. She hadn't felt sick at all that night. She seemed genuinely confused, had no idea what we were talking about. Over and over and over again, she told us that she'd been asleep all night right up until a few minutes ago, when all our screaming and our running around woke her up. After a little while, Miranda became exasperated and cranky from all the questioning. I don't blame her. It was the middle of the night, and her parents were fussing over her for something she said never happened, asking her questions she couldn't answer. Eventually, when we were convinced she wasn't deathly ill, we brought Miranda back to bed. We laid with her until she fell asleep, which she did in about 5 minutes, and then tiptoed into the kitchen to pour ourselves 2 glasses of whiskey. We sat in silence at the dinner table, sipping our drinks and trying to process the outrageous and abhorrent events of the evening. I remember that I'd been staring at the crystalline design on my glass when it hit me. The baby monitor. Even though she's not a baby, we still have one in Miranda's room because of her asthma. I don't know why it hadn't occurred to me to check it sooner. Without a word, I stood up and ran as quietly as I could to our bedroom to retrieve the monitor, and with trembling hands, I brought it back to the kitchen table. Tim dragged his chair next to mine, and together we watched the footage. From 8:30 p.m. to when we checked, Miranda definitely never left her bed. And the question that has haunted me ever since, the one that literally keeps me up at night, the one that leads me to study my daughter's face and eyes in some attempt to try and ascertain if she really is my daughter, is who was that little girl who whispered to me at 2:03 a.m., "Mommy, are you awake?"
Oh my God. I have full body chills.
Yeah, that's a good one, right?
Oh God.
Yeah, that one creeps me out too. After going over it a few times now, still gives me the chills.
It's so upsetting because it when paranormal stories come in that play on your most vulnerable feelings and
Parental instincts.
Exactly, one of which is like taking care of your babies. Oh my God. And like anybody who's listening who has children of their own, is an aunt, an uncle, who has babysat, who's worked a summer camp, like anyone who has spent any time around little kids in an overnight situation. Oh my God. We've all been woken up, like tapped on the shoulder. It is so jarring.
Yeah.
Man.
No pics are associated with this story, but here, just from Flickr, is a creepy smiling kid.
Oh, okay.
And then this one, some AI by Molly Box that she wanted to put together what she felt was possibly this girl from the story.
Yeah.
And there she is.
Oh, okay. That's not what I pictured.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like what I was picturing was like colder eyes.
Yeah.
Like less expression.
I don't need to see that though.
I know it is disturbing.
Well, yeah, it's just a creepy photo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man. I was like, there was some of it that was really funny. Just like
in the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, like a little ninja and just like all those things. And kids are creepy. They just say creepy shit. I mean, they're not intending for that.
Yeah.
It's just like,
and their eyes dart around to weird places. They talk to people that aren't there.
Yeah.
They think they see things, whether or not they do. So you like, if you're already spooked or it's like the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I can totally see that where you're like, I feel something watching me.
Totally.
And then just spin your head around like the couch and there's just a little face right there.
Oh my God.
I mean, they don't understand social norms really either, so they don't even know they're being creepy.
Well, and like also as a little kid, when you don't feel good, even our kids at this age, like it hasn't been that long since like Monroe came to our room to get me because she wasn't feeling well. Like in the last couple of years, I mean, she's 16 and a half. And it's like she's got cramps, she doesn't feel, she wakes up, she can't find the heating pad or the Tylenol. And it's like, the door, because you're trying to be respectful. And like a little kid is too, they're just like, oh God, I don't want to get in trouble. And, they just slowly push the door open. Like everything about it is creepy.
Yep.
How would you go about waking up your folks if you didn't feel well? Do you have memories of doing that?
You know what? I was pretty stubborn about not doing it. I actually don't. I mean, maybe I did it when I was a very little kid, but I didn't do it with my mom. I don't remember ever doing it with my mom. I probably did. I just don't have a memory of it.
I'll have to ask her.
And then with my dad, he was not. He was not a nurturer growing up.
What?
So
your dad?
Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
So when I was with my dad and like stepmom over there, that's The Shining. Actually, from the first story, I was trying to read The Shining, and they actually did warn me. They're like, "That's pretty intense." And I was like, I don't know, 6th grade or something.
They warned you, aka they didn't take it away from you when they could have.
Yeah, and so I read it, and it did freak me out.
Of course it did.
Yep.
And by the way, parents take that shit away from their kids. Not so much because we're worried about you. It's because we don't want our sleep messed up.
Yep. And then I tried not to, but I went down there in the middle of the night. I asked if I could like sleep, in their room.
Oh, Bubba.
They said no.
Oh.
And so what I did is I slept outside their door in the hallway on the floor.
Oh, yeah. I did that. I've talked about that here before. Like, I can't tell you how many times my mom probably nearly almost tripped over me and like, broke an arm, a nose, fell forward because I would sleep outside hers and my dad's bedroom all the time. I was always scared.
Funny.
Always. I would go in and wake my mom up. Now thinking about it, must have been so creepy. I would just kind of give her like one little push on her shoulder. Like, Mom. And then I'd kind of like push her shoulder and then like wait. My heart would be racing. Because I also was aware that she was going to wake up and be startled.
Oh, yeah. So you're trying to minimize it.
Yeah, but I would just keep doing that. Just be like, And then it was just a lot of like, okay, just come get into bed with me. Just go to sleep, you know?
Cute.
And then I was remembering, this is so funny. It's so funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
My childhood neighbor, Nikki, she had an exorbitant amount of stuffed animals. Like, I don't know why, but she had a lot. And me and her and our other bestie, the three of us, it was me, Nikki, and Beth, we, one night, decided to just creepily sneak into her parents' bedroom and start piling stuffed animals on top of them.
That's hilarious.
Why did we think that was a good idea?
It's pretty funny.
Pretty funny from our perspective. Her parents not amused.
Yeah.
Because I'm talking like 20, 30 stuffed animals. And like the big ones that you get at the fair, like the big snake and like the weird like lion or tiger.
What a weird way to wake up.
Oh my gosh. Like, what? That is so dumb. But we did it. And it went on for like hours, because you like sneak in, you put one on, and Mr. Locker snored like he was trying to wake the dead. God, it's so funny.
Picturing you sneak down there, just right real quick before you jump in here. I used to get it because my sister would want to sleep in my mom's bed all the time.
Yeah.
She would get spooked easily.
Yeah.
And for a couple years there where we lived, she would have to pass by my room to get, to my mom's room. Like her little room was a little bit down the hall. And I would usually have my door cracked or whatever. I don't even remember why I would, but I've been watching TV in my room late at night all the time. And I would see her trying to sneak down there, and I would stop her from going. I'm like, go back to your room, Donna. I'm like, it's too much.
Oh.
Like, it annoyed me. And then I remember, so then what she would do, she would put a blanket over herself.
Like she was a ghost?
Like I can't see you, so you can't see me. And then she would just try to crawl past my door, which was it was easier to spot her now.
Yeah.
And she'll be in the blanket. I'm like, Donna, I see you in the blanket. Go back to your room. You're not that scared.
Oh.
I don't know why. It just annoyed the crap out of me.
Man.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe you wouldn't even offer to like let her sleep in your bed with you.
Oh, my mom would have like, well, can't you just go with you? I'm like, nope.
Danny. You monster.
Yeah, I was not always the best older brother. She's like 5.5 years younger. And it was just like that age difference where I'm like,
it was just enough.
It was always like a big enough gap where for most of our childhoods, I'm like, oh, you're just annoying.
Oh. Yeah, my brother and I are 3 years apart. We shared a room for many years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever remember. We had bunk beds. So like, for like a while, he was the top bunk, I was the bottom bunk. And then, you could break them apart and we'd have like side by side single beds. I don't ever remember sharing a bed with my brother. I don't ever remember being scared and turning towards him.
Yeah.
I bet he probably harassed the shit out of me too. So, like thinking back in little kid brain, I probably thought like, well, you're not going to help me.
Yeah. You're going to make it worse.
Yeah. Funny. Oh, little kids. Okay. Are you ready?
I am.
Who's your Layla this week?
I got a red one.
Red Layla.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the shirt that you're wearing, the Rougarou.
Yeah.
Swamp Legend. It's a really cool t-shirt. It's a company down in New Orleans called The Dirty Coast. They have some cool graphic tees.
They do. They have some fun stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's investigate some black magic.
Okay.
Hey, Dan and Lynze. My name is Jackie, and I'd like to share a story with you as it was relayed to me by my grandmother. As a child, whenever my entire family would get together, we knew that it was only a matter of time before the adults would start telling stories about paranormal experiences. Naturally, us kids made sure we were done playing outside by 9 p.m. so we could sit around and listen. This story is 100% true. I've heard it retold many, many times, and it's never changed, regardless of the person telling it. It took place long before I was born. My grandmother was the one who would initiate these storytellings. So, do you remember that night kind of stories where everyone got quiet and relived the experience with vacant expressions? My mother, the youngest of 7 siblings, was about 8 at the time. I'm now 38, so again, this is a really long time ago. I'm from South Africa, and most of my family had farms or stayed on farms as foremen back in the 50s and 60s, which is more or less when this story took place. My grandmother had always been extremely inquisitive and sensitive when it came to the paranormal. Ghost sightings were nothing new for her. Just a quick example. She once told us that a farm that they lived on had a massive tree stump outside of the back door. On it, she would slaughter her chickens. One day, at about 1 p.m., she was headed out there again with a chicken and an axe. When she put the chicken on the stump, right in front of her, a woman appeared on top of the stump, hands bound behind her back, clearly standing up by herself, but decapitated, and her head nowhere in sight. Grandma dropped the chicken, ran back in the house screaming. And this was how most of what she saw usually went. Single, one-off occurrences with no explanations. Okay, now back to the story at hand. My grandparents had recently moved into a new farmhouse where my grandfather was the foreman. The farm itself was somewhere in a rural part of South Africa. Most, if not all the workers who worked in the fields at the time were from around those parts and usually of African ethnicity. The events on this farm started off with single sightings of a distant floating light down the road or in the cornfields, but nothing that caused too much panic. My grandmother said on this one particular night, however, the kids were all settling in for the evening. Most of the occupants of the house were in their rooms, with the exception of my mother's middle brother, who was 18 at the time. He was visiting a neighboring farm where the girl he was seeing lived. Not having had any truly paranormal happenings in this house so far, none of the people living there were very alarmed until the phone began ringing that evening. Now, this of and in itself is not a weird occurrence, since most farms had phones which connected to a phone operator who would then dial you through to someone else manually. My grandmother, however, said this was not the sound of a normal ringing phone. It started in a low, slow ring and then grew louder and faster to an ear-piercing screech. When she picked it up, it just kept ringing, echoing throughout the house. And now everyone was awake and had gathered in the hall around the phone. Then the handle to the front door, which was locked, began turning and rattling. The door had a large window pane in the middle of it, so there was no way anyone could mess with the handle without being spotted. Also, none of their dogs were giving any notice to this activity. Alarmed, my grandparents sent the children back to bed and went to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, they heard the sound of what sounded like hundreds of marbles rolling across the wooden floor in the hallway. They investigated, but of course there was nothing there. My grandfather checked on the kids, one of which was the new wife of my mother's oldest brother and was about 25. When he knocked on the door, he heard her crying. He entered the bedroom to find her cowering in the corner on the bed, pressed against the wall, clearly very upset. She said as soon as she fell asleep, something had pulled the covers off of her. My grandfather, now extremely concerned, took her, gathered up all of the other kids, and made a bed in the floor in the main room. My grandmother, having 7 kids to take care of, did her ironing at night in the kitchen when everyone else was asleep and she could do it in peace. The iron she was using was one of those old ones that you heated up on a coal stove before using it. She said she was about halfway done when she noticed the shadowy figure of a German Shepherd-sized dog in the hallway. And although they themselves had numerous German Shepherd dogs, they were all outside at night. She could see the figure slowly creeping towards her, the kitchen and the hall illuminated only by a lantern. Frozen at the sight of this creature, she didn't make a sound. The figure crept closer and closer, and with every step she could see it morphing into something that looked like a hunched-over, crooked old person underneath a blanket. When it reached the doorway, she closed her eyes, let out a panicked scream, and without thinking twice, threw the iron in the direction of the figure. She missed, and the iron hit the coal stove, chipping the enamel, but the figure was gone. My grandfather came running, shotgun in hand. Before he could even inquire what had happened, they were interrupted by the sound of a car horn. They rushed to the front door to see my uncle speeding down the dirt road, honking his horn hysterically. Behind the old truck was a ball of white light chasing him. My grandfather ran outside just in time to see my uncle turn down the dirt road leading to the farm and crash straight through the closed gate before jumping out of the truck, the ball of white light still trailing him. They both ran into the house and watched as the ball of light reached the gate before it disappeared into nothingness. My uncle said he was heading home when he noticed a light above the farm swirling around in a circle. Almost immediately after it darted in his direction, it shot over the roof of the truck and then began to follow him. While he was busy telling his story, they heard the tractors in the barn all start up at once. The 5 boys and my grandpa ran to the barn and found all the tractors running, lights switched on, and not a soul in sight. But there was a white light bouncing around from one tractor to the next. After my grandfather switched them off, they all went back to bed, terrified. The following day, my grandparents were still puzzled. Why weren't any of their 6 dogs reacting to what had happened? For a few nights, they all slept in the main room together. Nobody was getting up to check out any of the noises. When looking through the windows, though, they saw that white light, that orb, swirling around in the cornfield. The following week, my mother walked out the front door when out of nowhere, a gust of wind from inside the house blew the door shut, slamming her hand so hard that the tip of her pinky was ripped off. My grandparents had had enough. They went to speak to a spiritual medium in town by the name of Claude Morgan. Claude was known for being able to help people who were having trouble with the paranormal. My grandmother told him everything that had been happening, and then he asked her a series of questions. One question was if they had recently been in an altercation with any of the farm workers. My grandfather recalled an incident not that long ago between him and one of the older workers, an African man named Bantam. There was an argument with regards to my father being chosen as the foreman, as Bantam felt he was just as qualified to do the job instead of working the fields. Claude then proceeded to ask for my grandmother's permission to put himself into a hypnotic trance to then soul journey and visit their farm. She agreed. He burned some herbs, laid down, closed his eyes, folded his hands across his chest, and this was followed by silence for several minutes as my grandparents sat quietly watching. When he eventually opened his eyes, he said he had found what he was looking for. While visiting the farm, he came across several spirits who lived there. A young man who had shot himself by accident with a shotgun but was harmless, and then a woman that walked the road towards the farm and sometimes walked around the house looking for attention, but she too was also harmless. But then there was a third entity, disguised by magic, shape-shifting to mask its true identity. Claude had to follow this creature for a while and eventually was led to the back door, and there its true identity and intent were exposed. He said that when my grandparents got home, they should take a sharp object of some sort and scratch off the paint of the newly painted steps in one specific spot. They there would find a mark, a magic symbol covered by the new paint. He told them the dog shadow figure from the hallway was Bantam, and that he comes from a long line of African witch doctors, and he possessed particularly powerful magic. The symbol was put on the steps by him as a sort of link through which he could work his magic. He had been completing rituals out of jealousy in an attempt to drive my grandparents from the farm. Absolutely stunned, my grandparents went home and did as they had been instructed. To their amazement, they found the symbol just as Claude had said they would, a small black marking. Before they left, Claude had told them not to worry, though. He also knew a few tricks and would be doing some sort of ritual of his own to visit Bantam. He told them to have a good night's rest and that tomorrow, Bantam wouldn't be arriving at work. In anticipation, the entire family were gathered outside the next morning to see if what Claude said would come true. When all the workers arrived, there was no sign of Bantam. My grandfather inquired with the rest of the staff about where he was. The workers said Bantam had been admitted to the hospital as he had suffered a stroke. The following week, Bantam returned to work, very clearly not having suffered a stroke, but my grandfather said he did seem ashamed, never looking up or looking him in the eye. He kept his head down and resigned by the week's end. After all this, all the activity on the farm stopped, and they lived there for quite a few years until they moved on to another farm. Jackie.
Yike.
And it's kind of a fun story. It's naughty.
Yeah.
And it's scary, but it's also kind of like, I like that Bantam that he got what was coming.
I never expected to hear a witch doctor type story here. Because I'll admit, I've always found that stuff just, I'm not a religious person. I'm also just not a superstitious person in many ways.
Yeah.
And so just like I wouldn't expect a preacher to be able to perform an actual miracle, I wouldn't be able to expect or I'd never expect a so-called witch doctor to be able to perform any actual magic, like real magic.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I just never, but that seal, them finding that seal under the paint on top of all that
symbol,
activity, that symbol, that little black marking on
Yeah.
top of all that activity that was happening, like one thing after another, and very intense things.
Yeah.
Oh man, that is crazy. The one that got me the most was early on in the story, the phone. I've never heard of that detail, like and especially back in the 50s or 60s,
Yes.
is when Jackie said this, story was set. You didn't have like different ringtones.
Oh, yeah.
Prior to the digital world, I mean, I can remember my grandma's phone and my friends, phones or their parents' phones, always the same. Ring,
Absolutely.
ring, like same time apart, everything.
Yes, yeah. How long it rings, everything.
And the mechanism I wouldn't think would be capable of naturally changing the tone.
Sure.
It's like they didn't use a lot of parts in there. They're not going to have the parts for you to be able to kind of go in there and jerry rig some like ring ding 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 ding, like play little songs or something. That would need like more components. So that was crazy for it to like rise in volume and frequency and just distort the sound. That's crazy.
That's interesting that is what set you off. The thought of the sound of hundreds of marbles rolling across a floor.
Specific sound.
It's very specific. And then for there to be nothing.
Yeah, and that would be very loud. That'd be a cacophony of noise.
Yep. And more than one person heard it. So it's like, it's confirmed and yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like one thing after another. The orb light chasing the guy driving.
The uncle. There was just so many things.
The tractors.
Boom, 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 one after another.
It was like, but when we got to the part where it's like, well, this Bantam guy, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, okay, well, it would make sense.
Yeah.
If you had the capability to torture someone.
Yeah, torment them and get them to leave.
So that you could have their job, you wouldn't do it slowly. You would just be like, let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's do it all at once, and it sounds like this happened relatively quickly.
I'm amazed in a situation like that.
I don't know why I think it's kind of funny.
I'm amazed in a situation like that. If you have the ability to torment someone like that, to bring the paranormal into this world and kind of direct it at someone,
yeah.
Why are you working at a farm? Couldn't you use that power to do something like,
to get money? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like couldn't you monetize that somehow? Or, especially in shady ways. And it is kind of shady to scare somebody out of their job.
Totally.
But I don't know, that's just crazy. That was a great story.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. It was just something very different.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, just a reminder, you guys, before I dive into this second story, in case you missed it at the top, it's very graphic. It's not a very long story, but it's graphic enough and just be careful with your kiddos and strong suicide here.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to give a big heads up on this.
Oh, sorry.
That's the end of the show.
That's the end of your story button.
Well, were you guys scared?
Did it freak you out? What do you think of that story?
What do you think? Wouldn't that be like a funny April Fool's joke? Just like
start it and
then immediately end it. And like, whoa, that was crazy.
That would be clearly we don't cut stuff out of this show. So we're gonna push this right button.
Let's get it correct. Good job. Dear Lady and Lord of the Creeps, Peeps, Roberts, and Annabelles. I'm a longtime creeper and a new Annabelle and enjoy listening to your spooks every week. I'm a retired police officer and have plenty of really spooky stories, but one in particular keeps coming to mind as I listen to your show. A few years ago, I was called to the home of a well-known family. The daughter, whom we had dealt with on several occasions before, had been on suicide watch when her father called 911 stating she was trying to kill herself. When I pulled up to the home, I could immediately hear screams coming from the house. I ran in to find a teenage girl covered in blood wrestling with her father over a knife. The girl appeared to have gashes in her abdomen as if she had already stabbed herself with the knife several times. I grabbed the girl, pulling her off her dad. I had pinned her on her back on the ground and was holding her hands as I straddled her waist as she tried to squirm free under my body. She was screeching and screaming for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than just a few minutes, when suddenly she grew unnaturally quiet and still. A few seconds later, an inhuman voice came from this small girl's body. She spoke in a language I have never heard before. She seemed to be chanting some sort of spell at me when suddenly her whole demeanor changed again. She calmed her voice and started rapidly shouting out the stats of the Chicago Cubs baseball team from the 1980s. Then she switched again to a young girl's voice begging for help, saying, "Oh, he's got me, please help." And just as quickly as before, she switched back to the inhuman chants. She snarled at me, tried to bite me, and then spat a mouthful of blood into my face while laughing maniacally at me. I flipped the girl onto her stomach to keep her face away from me when she began to lift her body onto all fours, picking me up completely off the ground. I'm 6 feet tall and weigh 230 pounds, and this girl couldn't have been more than 5'5", 100 pounds soaking wet. She lifted herself and me off the ground, and she somehow threw me off her back across the room into the wall behind me. While I scrambled to my feet, she grabbed the knife beside her and repeatedly stabbed herself in the stomach, laughing with every thrust of the knife. I managed to grab her again, kicking the knife away and handcuffing her behind her back to keep her from harming herself or anyone else. The ambulances had arrived along with my backup. I walked outside to get checked out and cleaned up at one ambulance while a fellow officer took the girl to the other ambulance. She was transported to the hospital and was later booked into a psychiatric facility. Fast forward about a month, I got a call from my sergeant letting me know that she had killed herself in the psychiatric facility. I was told that she had somehow broken the window in the door to her room and then used a shard of glass to slice open her abdomen. Then, while she was still alive, she pulled her intestines and other organs out and strung them around the room before she finally bled out and died. A few years later, after I had retired, I went on a camping hunting trip by myself, which I often do. I was asleep in my bed when I was awoken to the sound of someone crying. I checked my phone, 3:07 a.m. I focused my tired eyes across the camper where I saw a young girl crouched in the corner with her face in her lap, crying, rocking back and forth. I called out to the darkness, hello? Are you okay?" Nothing. I got out of my bed and walked towards her. I put my hand on her shoulder and I said, "Are you okay?" She stopped rocking and her shoulders stood still. I asked again, "Are you okay?" She looked up at me, and as I saw her face, I realized it was the girl I had wrestled with that night years ago. We stared at each other for a few seconds before she smiled at me. We stared at each other as her mouth filled with fresh blood and she started cackling at me. She sat up and started pulling her intestines out of a large laceration in her stomach as she laughed. I reached and stumbled backwards, tipping over a chair before I hit the ground. I woke up. I shot up straight in bed, gasping for air. As I caught my breath, I looked at my phone and noticed the time, 3:07 a.m. I sat there trying to recount what had just happened when I heard it, a faint crying sound at the other end of the camper. I sat there frozen. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just sat there. And then I heard a shuffling sound as if someone were crawling across the floor right towards me. The crying turned into a snarling cackle. At the foot of my bed, I saw the top of the girl's head. She moved along the edge of the bed around to my side. Once she got close to me, I reached over the bed and grabbed a handful of her hair. I was going to pick this bitch up and beat the shit out of her. But as I grabbed her hair, I woke up. My eyes opened and I was in my bed again. The clock read 3:07 a.m. Only this time, there was no crying, no cackling, just silence. I shot out of bed and ran to the door, not sure if I was really awake this time. I flung the door open and screamed, "Get the fuck out! You're not welcome here!" And then I shut the door and walked back to my bed, and to my relief, the clock read 3:08. As I'm sure you can imagine, I did not go back to sleep that night. I have continued to see this girl on a few occasions. Joe.
Yikes. That's a very sad and just intense and Very creepy story.
Very fucking creepy. It like takes me to another level of creepy.
The scene in the psychiatric center, I mean, this poor person, but also like how?
How? That's the thing. I firmly believe this is a modern possession. I like, because when you start to piece it all together, there's even someone who is incredibly mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they're incapable of feeling pain. So to be able to just repeatedly stab yourself and pull your organs out and laugh like that I can't.
That reads more like heavy drug, like PCP or something, which she wouldn't be able to get in all likelihood within the psychiatric facility.
Right. Okay. And before she is transported to this facility, the for me, the nail in the coffin of this is the inhuman strength. She's a tiny, 100-pound. For her to get on all fours with a 200-plus pound man on her back and whip him across a room.
Yeah.
I'm a very strong person. Like, I'm really fucking strong, right? I've got guns for days in these arms. I weigh 135 pounds.
I could pick you up and throw you across the room.
But I could not pick up you.
No.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like she was smaller than me.
Oh, yeah.
And she flies this guy across the room.
Yeah.
Okay, there's that. And then the other thing was the speaking in a language that, he's got her pinned down and she's just babbling, probably in Latin or something, but like some other language.
Different characters, the weird baseball stat person voice, than the unnatural, just like guttural kind of like groaning, weird noises, other language. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
And I don't truly know how. I don't think we call it multiple personalities anymore.
It's DID.
Dissociative.
Dissociative identity disorder.
Okay.
And even that, the jury is still out. There are plenty of psychoanalysts, psychologists, whatever, who believe it is very, very real. There are also many, many others who do not think it's real.
Yeah. So even if we're of the school of thought that is a possible diagnosis, this doesn't feel like that.
No,
this feels like actual, true, and like possession.
And a difference in strength wouldn't. I mean, yes, like theoretically, like one personality might get more pumped up on adrenaline and therefore be somewhat stronger, but to have like that difference in strength, that wouldn't be like a personality switch either.
No, I was saying the personality disorder in terms of like speaking different language, knowing these baseball stats.
I was just talking about like thinking of the whole scenario.
Oh, yeah.
With that, and like that still wouldn't explain like the strength, portion of it. I mean, again, that like PCP, there's probably like maybe some other drugs that can give you like a crazy
like Hulk strength.
Yeah, because like normally your body will shut down a certain amount of adrenaline, so you don't just essentially tear your muscles apart.
Yeah.
So you don't like hurt yourself. But like those things when like a mom lifts a car off of a baby, it's just such a crazy rush of adrenaline that I haven't read about like how injured they are after those things.
Oh, but I imagine.
But probably like tearing things up as they're doing those because usually your body protects you from that. So I mean, the strength, but again, like none of that explains what happens later.
Yeah.
That's the thing for me, like in the psychiatric facility with the window and then, oh my God.
Well, okay, so then also, two other things.
I don't know.
The reason, like two other reasons that I think that this is a possession is that Joe says at the beginning that this family was known to law enforcement and that this poor girl, this was she had ongoing mental health issues. Yeah. If it doesn't just sound like a girl, a young person struggling who just needs therapy or, it sounds like so much bigger. If you're calling the cops, this is a different level of fear and concern, right? Okay, there's that. The superhuman strength, we only ever hear about this, in my opinion, in this space when there is a possession happening.
Yeah, there are like the hallmarks of those markers, and one is strength.
Young women or like younger, right? Like when the spirits can.
That's more poltergeist.
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
But with that strength, the different languages, like the different kind of entities with inside. Another one that could be, I guess it wasn't necessarily in this one, but like unnatural weight. But there are like she would be unnaturally heavy if he tried to pick her up. Is like a hallmark of possession. And but yes, and there's that theory that like mental illness and possession could coexist in the sense that like the demonic entities are attacking someone who already is I don't want to. Suffering is a good word for it.
Yeah.
Suffering in a sense, and they already have things going on.
Yeah,
and they're going to add to their woes.
That's right. Like, it's this theory that you're already not at your strongest.
Like they get you when you're down, when you're having your problems with.
Like, it's like that phrase, like, don't kick a dog when it's down. It's like a spirit.
That's when the demons love to kick you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing on the strength that I want to point out about her death is that in a psych unit, that glass, if there's a window,
should have been security glass.
Exactly. So again, superhuman strength. Like that. That feels like next level.
And I'm like, it's so weird. Like, in a lot of those places, I mean, yes, there's places that haven't modernized, I'm sure, and this could have been a couple years ago. But like, they use that glass. Oh, it's kind of like newer windshields, where if you were to break it, it would just crumble. Oh, so you couldn't get a shard to cut yourself with.
Gotcha.
But on the other kinds, I always thought
like fiberglass. Is that fiberglass?
I don't know what it is. How that special kind of glass that breaks, just kind of breaks into little crumbles.
Yeah.
But what I'm picturing, like in a psych facility, if it was older, I can picture this very specific kind of metal door. And there's a rectangular window that is taller than it is wide.
Yes.
And it has those little threads of something going through it. It's that security glass.
Yeah, it makes like almost like a honeycomb looking design inside of it. But you can see right through it.
And I think whatever those little lines are,
yeah,
I think they're structurally very similar to like when you put this the rebar, these iron bars inside of concrete.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's like little tiny pieces of metal wire.
Yeah. It just increases the structural integrity of that glass significantly, so that in theory, you can't do what she did.
Yeah. No, it's fucking terrifying. When I read this, that's
a haunting story.
And then like, of course, he's having dreams of it.
Oh my God.
Whether he's having nightmares of it, PTSD kind of piece of it, or if she is like if in death she is still possessed, or, her soul's been taken by the devil or whatever you want to call it, and now it's trying to get back to him. Or
the entity that possessed her is just messing with him now.
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's a really disturbing story.
Yes. Thus my multiple warnings.
Yes. Yep. That made total sense, because like, wow, that is intense. That is graphic.
Yeah.
Woo-wee.
Let's lighten it up.
Do you want me to start with the Annabelles?
Sure. Go right ahead, Dan.
Okay. Man, that one got me.
I know. It's...
Oof. Yeah.
I know.
And I'm used to so much true crime, but I'm like, I just didn't expect it. I was like, oh my God.
I know.
Wow. I'd like to thank the following Annabelles for supporting us here on Scared to Death.
And also because he's like a police officer, a retired police officer. Like there is no gain for him to tell this story. If anything, it's like, I don't know. And it's just so direct and to the point. It's not superfluous with its language. Yeah. It's like, it feels so... Because I know people are going to be like, oh, he could have made it up. It's like, you can come with a skeptic brain and that's fine.
About almost any of
these, but there's something about this and I'm like, what does he gain?
Yeah.
And why? Oh, God. Okay, sorry.
Now I'm going to thank the following Annabelles for real. I'd like to thank Miranda Up for Questions for supporting our show, Dakota Zuris, Tyson Henkelman, Leslie Brock, Scarlett Serena Witch, Hannah Porte, I never know with little accents. Aaron Carlton and Stephanie.
Nice. All right. So I'd also like to thank the following Annabelles. Gabby Becker. Buckeye Guy 666. All right, listen. O-H. Eat some Buckeyes for me. Gabby. Rhymes with lethal.
Oh, okay.
What word would that be?
Rhymes with lethal. Lethal? I mean, I was going to say diesel, but I have to say lethal.
Lethal.
Like, with a list.
Like Barcelona?
Barcelona. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Well, rhymes with lethal. Can't figure it out.
Yeah, can't figure it out. You stumped us.
Good job. Shelby White, Lynn Mader, and Jeremy Fields.
Well, thank you.
And then I have a handful of spoopy shoutouts. To Abigail from BC, I love you so much. We can make it through anything life throws at us. I will always be there for you. And I can't wait for you to be my wife this week.
Aww.
Love that. To Kenya, Colton, and Kai from Rob, I love all of you with all my heart, and happy anniversary to Kenya. To Ash from your Yeti man, aka Bigfoot, happy 1-year anniversary, or maybe 2-year, depends how long it takes you to catch up. Thank you for showing me this podcast. To Sebastian from Maxwell, thanks for taking care of me throughout your time on Earth. You meant the world to me, and I miss you terribly. I love you, Bugaboo. This was Maxwell's pet.
Aw.
I know. Can't imagine. To Manuel from David, happy 24th birthday. Okay, now listen, this is like an inside joke. I don't even know what he's trying to say. Yasum biatch.
Okay.
Y-A, ya,
Yeah,
some,
some bitch.
B-E-E-A-T-C-H. Biatch.
Okay.
There you go. To Mom from Raven, happy belated birthday. I love sharing this little slice of spookiness with you. Thanks for showing me this show. I love you. And to Dr. Spicy, love always and forever, your boo. Happy 12th anniversary to the most incredible wife in the world. Thanks for everything you do for me.
Aw, that was great.
And that's it.
And that's our show.
That's our show.
Thank you for continuing to send in your personal tales of terror to mystory@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. You can email us for everything else at info@scaredtodeathpodcast.com. Thank you to Logan Keith for scoring today's show. Thanks to Heather Rylander for organizing the My Story emails. To book editor Drew Atana for polishing and preparing listener stories for book number 6. Thank you to Molly Box for finding both tales I told this week. We are on Facebook and Instagram where we post pics that accompany episodes and more at Scared to Death Podcast. We also have a private Facebook group, Creeps and Peepers, full of over 25,000 fellow horror lovers, so get in there.
25,000.
Big thanks to the All Seen Eyes, the Creeps and Peepers moderators. Thanks for making our online community such a fun and welcoming place. Enjoy your nightmares, Creeps and Peepers. Hope you were scared to death.
Bye.
If spirits threaten me in this place, fight water by water and fire by fire. Banish their souls into nothingness and remove their powers until the last trace. Let these evil beings flee through time and space. Evil may pass through, but hath no home here within, scared to death.
Mad Magic Productions.
Danny. You monster.
Uh-huh.